Well, with me here is the Labour MSP Polly McNeill and in Edinburgh's Liberal Democrat MSP Robert Brown. Luke, let's start with the last point first. I mean, what proposals would you like to raise income taxes here to a higher rate than the rest of the UK, or would you like to lower them?
I think the point that's been made by David Mundell is that for the first time when the budget is set in the Scottish Parliament, as we're about to do now, that part of that budget process will mean that the Parliament has to actually set its Scottish income tax rate. And I think in doing that, I think that makes it real for people that we will be more accountable for what we spend. So if we choose not to raise taxes, people will see that as a positive decision being made there. But of course, it's not the only tax that's been devolved. There's other taxes and significant borrowing powers. And when you put the package together, I think it makes a substantial difference to Scotland's finances.
So you don't have any proposals to either raise or lower taxes?
Well, the Scotland Bill...
Your instinct would be just slap the 10p on that's been taken away?
The Scotland Bill is about the statutory powers for the Scottish Parliament to raise a Scottish level of income tax and other specified taxes.
Okay.
And the point shouldn't be missed, because that is what the principle of this bill is making the Parliament accountable for what it spends and giving it some powers to make some decisions that will matter to people.
Robert Brown, are you itching to raise income tax here above UK levels or to lower it below UK levels?
Not necessarily, but I think you're missing the point that if you look at the UK government, it's not that often that the tax rates are themselves changed at that level either. As David Mundell says, it's a perfectly legitimate choice to hold the tax levels as they are. But there have been proposals, you know, at different points of the Parliament by different parties to either raise or to lower the tax levels already. In the future, you know, along with the borrowing powers, I think there's quite a basket of powers there which give us remedies to particular situations. The Forth Bridge was mentioned in connection with the borrowing powers. You could envisage that in certain circumstances the tax rate might be raised to provide more social spending, or lowered to provide more economic stimulus.
But you wouldn't propose actually doing that?
Well, you'll see things when we come to the manifestos in the election. That's not really the issue. The issue is giving the powers here which are available to the
for the vast majority of people who are likely to vote in this election. That precisely is the issue. I mean, we've had 10 years where you've had... Look, my point is very simple. It's this. You're not going to vary tax by more than 1 or 2p either way anyway. And you've had that power for 10 years, and none of you have ever used it. So what's the difference?
I think you make the point that you miss the point that this is a much wider proposal. We've got the borrowing powers coming in. We've got a number of other taxes being devolved. There's a power also by subordinate legislation in effect at Westminster to devolve other taxes in the future if that is seen appropriate and if both governments agree. This is a step on a journey putting in place a framework which will take us forward for a number of years to come.
All right.
It will give us, I think, a very robust settlement which will deal with things in all sorts of as yet unpredictable circumstances over the next 10, 15, 20 years.
Right. So, well, Polly McNeill, do you think stamp duty in Scotland should be higher or lower than in the rest of the UK?
Well, again, I think you're missing the point. It's the ability to be able to choose to raise or lower stamp duty that matters, the ability to be able to raise or lower environmental taxes. And of course, in answer to the question I think you put to Alex Salmond in the package, I mean, Calman's quite clear. If there is an increase in the number of taxpayers in Scotland, Scotland does benefit from this, and this idea that somehow this will be detrimental to Scotland is just utter nonsense. Scotland has every chance of being better off under these proposals, but there are choices to be made, and all of these choices about taxes or using borrowing powers, that's for the government of the day to decide how to use those powers.
Do you, Robert Brown, do you think stamp duty should be higher or lower than the rest of the UK?
I have to say, Gordon, I find the actual direction of the questions a little bit frustrating. We're not actually deciding today the policies of a particular party or a particular government. What we're doing is putting in place for the Parliament and for the Government of Scotland options that are available to them in circumstances to come over the years of the future. And I think this will give us much greater flexibility to deal with and to tackle Scotland's economic challenges in the years to come.
Right. OK, well, I'm sorry if the trend of my questioning isn't to your taste. What I'm really trying to establish is that from the point of view of the vast majority of the citizenry in Scotland, who know that all of the parties here have had a power to vary taxes for 10 years and not used it, given that neither of you are prepared to say whether you think income tax should be higher or lower here, or even whether stamp duty, which you'll actually have to set from scratch, should be higher or lower here, from the point of view of the average citizen, why should they care about any of this?
I think it's pretty important stuff. It is the biggest transfer of fiscal and financial powers since the Union. And I think that is actually a very important move forward in terms of the accountability of the Scottish Parliament. You've got, in a sense, three options, haven't you? You've got the status quo as it currently is, which has got a degree of unaccountability on the financial side. You've got independence, which we know, had it been in place in the last period of the recession, would have lost the Scottish Exchequer £2.5 billion in terms of the effects of the tax take of the recession. Or you've got the position that's been put forward by the Scotland Bill and the Calman proposals, which will give a future Scottish government of any complexion the right to do a whole series of things, including, for example, tackling the problem of the Forth Bridge through the use of the borrowing powers.
All right. OK. Paul Emilio, can you think of any compromises that could win over this, marry the SNP's points with the points you're making? I mean, you're going to have to try to do that, aren't you?
Well, I certainly hope the SNP would come on board with this. I mean, they certainly marginalised themselves in the past, and I think it's significant that the proposals are being taken forward in a non-partisan way, in the sense that the Labour Party, the Liberal Democrats and the Tories are agreement about how to take this forward. But the Scottish Parliament is going to scrutinise this bill, and I think that's very important. So there is an opportunity for every party, including the SNP, to say where they think there should be changes. But can I just address it? There aren't flaws. This is rubbish that Alex Salmond's talking about.
We'll
flaws.
have to leave it there.
But
all right.